Green criminology is the study of environmental harms and looking at how these harms should be examined by criminologists. There are four ways in which criminologists look at these environmental harms. First, we look at the scope and extent and volume of the crimes committed by corporations and governments. Secondly, we look at the what are called environmental justice issues, that is, how race, class, and gender are related to negative environmental outcomes, such as the placement of hazardous waste sites in communities. We also look at issues involving the vast victimization that are caused by green crime. So we look at human victims, non-human victims, and ecosystem victims. The study of green criminology was originated in 1990 when I published the first article on this issue, focusing on the unification of green theories and Marxian political economic analysis to try and draw in environmental issues into criminology. My interest in green criminology came from a couple of different sources. Growing up, I was a child of the environmental era, so we were kind of always pushed to consider these environmental issues in school, and I took an interest in those. My father, who was a professor of toxicology and pharmacology, also had an interest in environmental issues, and I was influenced by that. And one of my best friends, who is now a professor of biology, was also interested in environmental issues. So all those things kind of came together. My two recent books focus on political economy and green criminology. And political economy looks at how economic systems and organizations affect outcomes, in this case the outcome of green crime. So the question is, how does economic organization cause green crimes to occur? A political economic analysis, as I said before, is an analysis of economic organization and how the economic organization affects society. The treadmill of production is a specific form of the of political economy. It emerged in the United States following World War II, and the idea of the treadmill is the idea of an economic system constantly in motion on a the idea is it's on a treadmill. Following World War II, there were a number of changes in production that occurred that accelerated the pace of the treadmill of production. In my most recent book, we talk about the idea of a green revolution in the sense that we're trying to make criminologists realize that it's very important to look at these green crimes and green justice and green law issues, and that really beyond the issues that criminologists tend to study, street crimes, these behaviors have great impacts on society, and in many cases are leading to the destruction of society. So some of the contemporary issues we can think of in this context, such as global warming. Global warming is a form of green crime occurring in different ways, that through violations of law or because of the structure of law, leading us to a situation in which society is beginning to collapse. Part of the point of green criminology is to draw the attention of people engaged in policy and lawmaking to these issues of ecological destruction, because they do have such great impacts on society, impacts that we don't normally consider. So, for example, on a given day in the United States, 1/3 of the population is exposed to air pollution that violates the law, meaning that they're being victimized by a green crime caused by corporate pollution. And when you talk about 1/3 of the American population, you're talking about 100 million people a day being exposed to these kinds of negative pollution problems that obviously cause extensive health issues for people. So you have rising rates of cancer, lung diseases, so there's a whole range of negative outcomes for people that really need to be addressed. And the role of criminologists in doing that is to bring an extra voice to this discussion and to make lawmakers realize that this is not just a kind of sideline issue that, you know, we should protect the environment if we can. Right? It's really important to protect the environment because, again, public health and the global health of global health is also dependent upon this. Green criminology has a natural affinity to the global mission of the University of South Florida. Green crimes occur everywhere, and one of the biggest green crimes that we see in the world today, things like climate change and extensive levels of pollution, are global matters that solving those require the cooperation of governments across the world. And so part of working on that is working on these kinds of issues as to how governments, universities, and other agencies get involved in solving these global problems. One of the things that we're trying to work on is, again, expanding this movement. And so, again, working with the International Green Criminology Working Group and bringing more criminologists into doing research on these issues, trying to fund some initiatives for graduate students who are interested in these events. So trying to raise some small amounts of capital so that that as a group we can fund graduate students to go to conferences and engage in these discussions with their criminological colleagues, for example. It's hard to change a discipline, so the plan is a slow, long plan, and it's been unfolding for now 25 years. So one of the questions that people often ask is, what do you do when you study green criminology after you graduate? For undergraduates, a number of them go into environmental enforcement agencies, and because they have an interest in preserving the environment, and so this kind of fits with their interest. Now, normally in a criminology department, these are not classes that those students would get. So here we probably generate more students who are interested in those issues. For graduate students, again, part of the interest is in joining agencies that enforce environmental regulations. So for some of those students, they will join federal agencies. And for students who are really involved in this, they want to continue on and address these issues in research. In terms of undergraduate classes, I teach a couple of different seminars that expose students to major issues related to green crimes and their forms. And one of the things that students always kind of marvel at is that there's so many of these crimes to talk about. So, for example, one of the things that students are surprised about that we talk about are toxic towns in America. And toxic towns are places that have been abandoned because they're so polluted people can't live there. And students are very surprised to find out that such places exist in the United States. But we create a whole list and we go through them. We also show them that it's not just in the United States, but other countries that toxic towns exist.